I'm very happy to be with everyone here this evening and to launch into this study, uh, which is going to be an adventure for me too. Sometimes I take on something that I'm very attracted to, and I don't have it. I've never taught it before. I don't know what is going to come up, what I'm going to say, um, and uh, and so it's going to be an adventure. But I know that we'll be sharing and entering into this journey together, so that always feels good. Uh, and we're going to be looking at this book, the Book of Balance and Harmony, which is a Taoist text, which you don't have to have, but we're going to be looking primarily at um, statements that are made in the very opening introduction. And they're very pithy, and I think we're going to get a lot of mileage out of just looking at them and contemplating them together. So if you want a copy of those statements, I can send them, and we'll be going through them maybe relatively slowly. We'll see. We'll get a lot of mileage sometimes out of one word. So we've done a lot of programs over the years, some of which really give a lot of food for thought, as this one might. And I enjoy thinking about things and sharing things to think about. But I really try very much not to balance that and to have this be a felt and internal and shared experience, not at the level of thought, but at the level of immediacy of our experience being here now. It could be very easy sometimes to just to talk um, on a kind of just on the level of ideas, and sometimes especially when I'm entering into something new, my fears that either, well, my choice is that either uh, I'm going to just sound like some kind of a philosopher, or I'm going to get totally confused in what I'm trying to say, and most likely both. But the saving grace that always comes up for me is, and I've come to really count on it, and sometimes it still takes me by surprise, is that whenever I sit down uh, to begin considering something, and when I sit down with all of you, there are two things that immediately take over that are the most important things. And it's good for me that that happens. And I think it always brings me, I think I would be doing a disservice in teaching anything if I didn't come back and begin there. And that is to welcome us back into our own experience of this moment. And that the opening up of that experience and how we experience it is really, you might say, the only real show in town. And all the words, the philosophies, the studies, they're all uh, hints and suggestions. And sometimes they take us far afield, and sometimes they come very close to home. But ultimately, they're supporting us in bringing the full capacity of our attention and our feeling to this moment. That is to say, an attention that's not restricted by our various projections and obsessions, but is just present for this moment without judgment and totally here. And the capacity to feel into this moment, which means that that attention is not disembodied, but it's living in our body. There may be emotions we're in touch with, or just a sense of our embodiedness. And both of those offer us a very strong clue, you might say, as to what we actually are, who and what we are. This capacity to rest here in our awareness, in our attention, and in our feeling, which you might say also is connected to the energetic experience of being alive, whether it be our emotions, whether it be the energy in our body. Uh, that is also a fundamental part of our aliveness, which in turn is a fundamental part of what all of this is. what we are, what this is, which is one thing together. And we can read all kinds of interesting texts and philosophy about that, but it's also all right here now. And we're being tutored in all of these great traditions in opening up the attention, opening up the awareness, and opening up the feeling capacity. And as part of that, it's also recognizing the field in which we are functioning, which includes each other, and to feel that that's a precious field that holds us. Uh, we're all the face of the cosmos looking at itself inside and together. And we can study that in words, but it'll always bring us back here. So, as I often do, and as a way of helping us all to be here together and cleave to the main point, it's worth slowing down and taking those good breaths, both because they begin to bring the whole mind-body system, into a kind of coherence for the moment, that the breath helps us to rest more easily in what we are rather than what our mind may be making of what we are. It helps us to rest our attention in this moment, and it also helps us to feel the embodied quality of what we are. And the embodied quality is not just I am me in a body. You can talk about it that way. But reality is embodied in its own creation. We are embodied. We are that awareness of the universe embodied in its own beautiful being, in its own beautiful manifestation. Some of these things that I say may or may not register, but whatever I say something that doesn't quite make sense, just put it on the shelf because we'll be coming back to all of it. And this beautiful text that we'll be looking at, when I discovered it, I was really overjoyed, both because, of course, I enjoy the culture and the spirit of Taoism, but also this book was so precise and so generous in its bringing everything to its beautiful essence, beautiful point. And it was written with the intention of kind of clearing away the distractions that we get into mentally and that Taoism got into over its very rich millennia of history. Uh, and we're going to see that and Taoism is a very broad cultural, spiritual, historical movement that created civilizations, that created great teachings from starting from the most basic observation, you might say, of the way things are, and opening into and understanding at the most subtle level something about the way things are that could inform us about how to live good lives, even how to build a good civilization. But the Taoists were very much in the world too. Some of them, we see them sitting on their mountain ledges or down by the river. But they were also very involved in the world. They were scientists and explorers. Uh, they were herbalists and doctors. They created really Chinese medicine, herbology, many other things. And over the years, also in Taoist culture, as in any culture, there were many schools evolved and many different sects and preoccupations of people who took some aspect of the study of life and just got totally focused on that and made that be, for example, when Taoism and some of the teachings that are really referring to very subtle spiritual principles, but sometimes it would like, be spoken of in alchemical language, or when they talk about uh, the becoming immortal, which is also a spiritual principle. Different sects might take it very literally in terms of either looking for the herbs or the certain minerals or crystals or this or that that would create the immortality or this or that, or they might get involved in various sexual tantras, working with the energies in the body, which is all totally valid, but they'd become preoccupied with that one part of things and miss the fundamental point. They wouldn't get down to, and in some of the later schools of Taoism, of which this book is an expression, was really trying to sift through all of that and try to find that which it had in common, but also bringing it back to the essential point. And very interestingly, as I mentioned in the thing I sent out yesterday, I think there was a time, well, of course, as Buddhism came into Chinese culture, there were some schools of Buddhism that were deeply affected by and drew from the Taoist culture and the Taoist way of talking about things and putting things. And it became very infused in how they expressed their Buddhist teaching, and that became Zen or Chan in China. There was a great connection there. And in turn, centuries later, when this complete reality school, as it was called, was really wanting to resurrect Taoism in its purity, in its essence, they drew back in turn from the Chan teachings, recognizing that the Chan had actually was true to the subtlety and the of the teaching, and they were able to reinfuse their Taoist teaching back from the Zen. So there was a great give and take back and forth. So I want to just take another moment and invite you to your breath, invite you to a sense of your body, invite you to a sense of dropping everything, which we're going to be invited to do in the very first sentence that we read, I think, today. Noticing that at any given time, we're carrying a lot. Sometimes not so obviously, we're not necessarily feeling burdened, but we're carrying a lot of structures for how we look at the world, for how those structures live in our body, for what we kind of allow or not allow as possible or true, or how even what's possible for how we may feel. Okay. We carry a lot. And with every breath, there can also be we don't have to even know what it is we're carrying. If we can feel that inner gesture, if we can learn what it feels like to let go, because it's a total letting go. There's an inner place that just begins to open. And so as we come into the first, I was so delighted in the very opening statements of this book. The book consists of a compendium of the writings of this one Taoist teacher, dialogues, questions, statements. And it opens with a couple of pages of just basic opening statements in which she summarizes the entirety of the teaching. And again, Taoist teaching is a teaching that really is for all of life. It's very naturalistic in that it concerns itself with body, with energy, uh, um, with creativity, with spirit, with all of these things, with vitality. It's not a disembodied spiritual practice by any means. It really presumes to help us to understand the totality of the experience of existence in this universe, the energies and the mysteries that are involved and that are unfolding in us and as us, moment to moment. And the opening statement The first sentence is the Tao is basically utterly open. I read that and I said, God bless you. I was so happy to read that one sentence. The Tao is basically utterly open. Openness, one of my favorite words, because it's hard to confine openness to a new idea. In the West, we think of basic principles, basic spiritual principles, when we give it a name like spirit, which seems like something we get. What did we mean by what is the spirit? What is spirit? Or even God, even if we have a sense that God is like everything, there's still so many images and pictures of there is something that is God, right? Or even emptiness. You know, we get very confused about emptiness because emptiness means really empty of anything that we can attribute and lay on it. It's just nothing that we can do with it. It's really open, really means openness. But we think of emptiness, even emptiness conjures the idea of something. There's something that is empty. You know, there is the absence of something, and it's a condition, which that's not what emptiness is saying, or that there's this universe and the universe is empty, which is just giving another particular picture of what this thing is, you see. So all these different words lend themselves, some either obviously or subtly, to just another idea that we're holding on to as the basis for everything. But openness, just, you know, there's no container there. There's no thing that you can make out of it. The door is open. And yet it's saying that the ultimate nature of the Tao, the ultimate nature of the principle of everything is openness, not somethingness, not like this or like that. You see. So I want to explore this word, openness. We spent a lot of time today exploring openness. Because the nature of the mind is to create a kind of closedness. It's to wrap around something, to wrap around our view of reality or of a thing, and we say, this is what it is, or this is how it is, or this is who or what I am, or what I'm not, etc., etc. Right? The very nature of the mind is create structure and form, and to invest it with a boundary, with a definition, uh, with a closed system that we can work with in our relative universe to survive and get by. And we use that same tendency with all these philosophical ideas, like whether it be God or whether it be emptiness or whether it be spirit. And so what we're being invited to do is saying, we can say, oh no, it's not that, it's beyond that, it's beyond words. But to be invited to open, to just open is our fundamental, you might say, existential activity. It's not to figure out or come up with a new idea of how it is, but to start by understanding this gesture of being open. And that's an invitation to the mind not to think or label the world in a certain way, but to begin to enter into a capacity. It's like the basic invitation of all true meditation or contemplation, or even prayer, is to come into this place of openness and availability to something that cannot be reduced to what the mind is always going to reduce it to. And so to relax the mind, even as we say in the intensive, in the enlightenment intensive, the two fundamental principles that will allow us to be available, we say intention and openness. Intention is what brings our awareness here to this moment that we're considering, and openness is what drops any projection that we're making on that. We're willing to come here and be open and available to that which we can't reduce to our ideas. And And so the fundamental gesture, you might say, spiritual gesture, is not an idea, but a gesture of being open. And even though there are so many different meditation traditions and techniques telling us to do this or to do that, fundamentally, they're all just different ways of inviting us to be open into the nature of that, the nature of that moment. Some are more open-ended than others. Okay. So the Tao is fundamentally, utterly open, and we will see that that openness also, out of that openness, will come the fullness of creative potential. Um, and out of that fullness of creative potential will come a world of all kinds of form and appearance as we experience, and where we'll get where the mind, where awareness gets all caught up in ways in which we begin to shut things down and hold things in certain fixed ways and lose the Tao, lose the fundamental openness, which is the fundamental truth of our being. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that we live a life, obviously, well, no, where we tend to get stuck in all kinds of places that lead to suffering or that lead to the infliction of suffering, right? It's the same as basic Buddhist teaching. Really, the teachings are the same, we'll see, using different languages. There's a misapprehension, there's an ignorance of some fundamental nature um, that is, on one hand, completely open, but the basis for a creative harmony, right? The openness is not blah, it's not blotto. It's just saying that all creative, all arising, all life, all um, and ultimately at the human level, all health, right? All the full flow of vitality, of life and energy, which also has to do with the health of the body, as of course Chinese medicine and philosophy also teaches about. All comes from the openness, the fundamental openness of being, which allows for the openness of flow of energy, the openness of manifestation of creativity, the openness of recognition, mutual recognition in relationship, you know, uh, and the honoring of each other. All these things come from a fundamental openness, and all of the problems, the distortions we get into as human beings in our own lives, and obviously in the world and history as we're experiencing it, comes from the particular myriad idiosyncratic patterns of holding ideas and uh, fixations and projections that keep us in disharmony, in turmoil, and in ignorance of the underlying nature, which is really more released, more is fundamentally open. And so at the spiritual level, the fundamental invitation is to discover, you might say, the nature of that openness, beginning with the practice of openness. I can, for example, would take a practice like watching the breath, a mindfulness practice. Okay. Watching the breath is a useful practice. It can help begin to relax us, begin to focus our attention, etc. But that practice of watching the breath will be that much more fundamentally valuable if it consists actually at the same time of the sense of opening to the breath, opening to this moment of experience. It's not just something that we're doing by rote that's going to help us focus or get somewhere. Ultimately, it's always an invitation. Of course, I like to use the word intimacy. It's intimacy because our closedness, our fixations, prevent intimacy because we're projecting definition and separation. and overwhelming life with our own projection. And so we can't see what's there or be with what's there. When we relax that and begin to open, that's the beginning of intimacy. So I can watch my breath or follow it, and also this, but there's some other part of me that can just relax and open to the breath at the same time, right? That's a deeper intimacy of awareness, and it's going to be a larger doorway into the unfolding and opening that my practice is about. It's not just a mechanical holding my attention, right? It's an invitation to ultimate intimacy. So all of our different spiritual practices can be that to the extent that we allow it. Or another way of saying that is everything that we do, including our spiritual practice, is a potential doorway or invitation into that intimacy that by definition, or not by definition, by its very nature of intimacy, is not intimacy with something that we are, that we know what it is and we're being intimate with. It's the very act of relaxing that and opening up another faculty of mutuality, of openness, in which that which we are open to or intimate to rises and becomes a part of the greater sphere of our awareness and being. So the first statement actually consists of three sentences. It says the Tao is basically utterly open. Utter openness has no substance. It ends in endlessness and it begins in beginninglessness. So what that's really saying, it's not giving us a new thing about, well, there's substance, but it doesn't have it, or there's endlessness or beginningness. It means drop it. It means those categories can't hold it, can't capture it. It's simply openness. There's no substance underlying it because that's just the mind trying to put another quality on it. So it's not about that. It's about resting in openness. When we rest in openness, experience will arise, will unfold, but it's not an experience that we're grabbing onto and nailing down and making it a part of our story or our projection or our fixation. It's really stepping into another good word for openness is freedom. Okay. Into the freedom of being that's not restricted by our mental projections, into the openness of being that reveals itself beyond our tendencies to contract. And of course, Buddhism will say the same things. I often quote this wonderful statement by this Burmese um, master when asked about how do we, by his disciple, how do we understand the difference between true Dharma and that Dharma which is not really, is kind of a distraction, or lesser Dharma is not really getting to the heart of things. And he said, just as the ocean has only one taste, the taste of salt, the true Dharma has only one taste, the taste of freedom. Okay. And our understanding of that can keep opening up and opening up. Freedom, openness. And yet the paradox, the beauty is that freedom and openness is not just some kind of like wild, you know, uh, incoherent nothingness. That freedom and openness is beautifully manifesting and unfolding as a whole creation that has a natural harmony and balance to it, because paradoxically, this nothingness of which is harmony and balance itself also expresses and manifests itself as harmony and balance in the manifest way, which we'll be getting into. And so there's potentially a whole world that we can participate in of balance and harmony and relationship, but which is just a natural expression of the Tao, right? Going with things as they are, as the Taoists would say, following the way of things, the openness of things rather than beginning to constrict ourselves and others to projections based on a separation, a conflict, etc. So no substance, openness. So since the mind, I may be repeating myself, but since the mind wants to make something of something, we don't sit here forever and constantly, well, what is openness? Rather, we come from the heart of openness. What does it mean to allow myself to be open? What is it that can open? So as a useful and practical practice, it also means, as I've been saying for a long time, beginning to allow and open to this felt sense of what am I actually feeling in this moment? How am I actually holding myself or manifesting in this moment? And can I even sense that part of my experience that is a kind of a contraction, however subtle it may be? Because if I don't have a sense of, if I don't recognize my holding, I'm not going to I'm not going to be able to recognize the gesture of opening. Uh, you know, on one level, I can, and if I don't notice that I have all these ideas in my head, I can't let go of those ideas in a sense. And I can't learn to how to say, oh, 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 I'm just here. Similarly, in the body, I may notice all kinds of subtle contractions. Obviously, we all have some obvious stresses that we carry at different times, sometimes profound stress, and we're working on wanting to relax that. But then there's also that subtle level of contraction or stress, which defines the subtle way my body holds itself as an extension, you might say, of the way my ego holds itself, which is just, functional. I go through the world like that, but it's constricting not only at the level of my awareness, but at the level of my body energy, at the level of my health, right? At the level of the circulation of vitality or qi. And so the Taoists, again, are combining those two pictures. The Taoists say very clearly, and Chinese medicine says very clearly, that the state of our mind or awareness also affects the state of the flow of the qi or the vital energy in the body, which in turn affects the state and the health of the body, which in turn also may influence the state of our minds. And so there's a kind of can be a closed cycle that's keeping us a little bit contracted and limited. So at all these levels, I can begin to enter in. In Qigong, for example, I'm working both with opening up flow of energy and opening up awareness. That's not always emphasized so much, that Qigong is about open awareness. That's going to affect the health of my body and also begin to contribute to the openness of my awareness and well-being. Uh, Similarly, Chinese medicine talks about recognizing where there is constriction and limitation in the flow of vitality in the body, which then may be creating physical illness. And that restriction on the vitality and flow of energy in turn may be determined by certain holding patterns and emotional patterns, right, that I'm also holding on to. So it's all an expression of one whole working in potentially harmony or disharmony. So to come back to the felt sense, to the practice that we can be invited to do, I want to take some time to explore that. If we, it's like, well, how do I proceed in the world? What does this mean? What am I supposed to be doing? Well, we can have specific practices where we're learning to open up to, like when we do the intensive, we're opening up we're opening up to our intention is to open up to the nature or the truth of who I am, or what this is. Okay. Uh, really, as a way of being in that open availability to fundamental truth. Really, I could say I'm opening to who I am or I'm opening up to who you are, but those are just different aspects of opening up to the truth. And what it's saying is that if I want to open to the truth, I have to be open. I can't be projecting something. And that we're capable, that because we are fundamental openness, we're capable of functioning as an awareness that is fundamentally open. And as we do that, we begin to become more, we are making ourselves again more aware to the underlying and open nature of what this is, which they might call the Tao, right? But the fundamental openness that we experience if we have a breakthrough, an opening experience in an intensive or any other thing, it's always going to be characterized by a greater sense of openness, greater sense of freedom, a greater sense of unity, a greater sense of joy, because the energy is more unrestricted, right? Um, Even and this is not only true in Taoist or Buddhist traditions, even in Christian contemplation, when you get to the true level of contemplation, not just the Christian dogma, as in The Cloud of Unknowing, the author of that contemplative classic says, just forget about your ideas about God or anything else. Um, your prayer is about coming into this moment with naked intention, right? It's like the intensive, naked intention upon God. When we're doing an enlightenment intensive, we have naked intention upon who we are. Yeah. Prayer, he says, it's just like naked intention upon what this moment is as God. But there's no idea of God. The point is the naked intention, openness. And so this is an all-prevailing principle of unfolding awareness. Okay. So we can apply that when we're doing a specific practice, if we're doing the intensive, or if we're doing our contemplation, meditation, we can do that. How do we begin to apply that in everyday moment? And especially, how do we begin to apply that in also in working with uh, our emotional holding patterns? Okay. There are some practical exercises we can carry with us. If I am tight, and so what I want to maybe take a moment to focus on is the gesture by which we become aware of the difference between contraction and release, even at subtle levels, so that we can make this gesture of release or openness an ongoing gesture in our lives and find that it may open up a lot. A lot of things may open up and unfold for us more easily when we do that because there's so many things we hold on to that accumulate that become inevitabilities, karmic inevitabilities because they're patterns we're holding. When we release them, things are much more open, right? In their unfolding, there's less inevitability, there's less karma, there's more freedom. So and you can also practice this to experience it. Imagine being very, very contracted, very, very tight, very, very tense. And so I'm holding, oh, not just say my arms, my chest, my shoulders, even my face, because we hold so much there. And I'm just exaggerating it so I can have a sense of what contraction really feels like. And then I release. You notice that the release of that contraction is, in a sense, not something that I'm doing, it's something that I've stopped doing, right? It's kind of, I have to be recognized enough to make that gesture, but it's a stopping of doing, right? And so there's something that we're always chronically doing that is defining ourselves and our experience of life. Uh, And we may not even recognize it enough to say, oh, I can release that. When we're doing something obvious, like if I choose to hold my arm very tight or hold a tight fist, I know I'm doing that, and I can also choose then to relax it and let go. The other thing you may notice, which I've mentioned before, is that if you hold your arm very tight right now on your lap in a tight fist, you're holding it very tight. You're also very aware of where your arm is. It's very well defined. Okay. If I totally relax, I'll open up my hand and totally relax my arm and let it rest on my lap. I'm still aware of the presence of having an arm, but it's not so well defined. It's like this way I can feel its shape somehow, right? And now it's just a presence. It's relaxed having an arm. So contraction contributes to the separate definition and identity, and release contributes to, you might say, interbeing, right? My arm is present. I can use it. It's a part of me. I know it's there, but it's kind of like part of being right now. It's just there. Uh, Similarly, the ego, in all its respects, is defined by a kind of a contraction. And any aspect of it that releases, it's present, but it's not a separate. It's not so defined. It's now just in fact, my arm now that I've let go of the arm and I'm less aware of it as a separate thing, actually is more able to do whatever I want it to do. Whereas here, there's not much it can do except pound. Oh, there it is. I've got it. I'm me. But there's not much I can do. When I drop it, I become much more diffuse, open, undefined, yet more free, more capable. So we can ask ourselves, like in this moment, as an exercise, let me assume, even though I feel like normal, not contracted, let me assume that just as relative to this is much more relaxed. There's something I'm doing right now that I'm not aware of that is holding me far more contracted and far less relaxed than I ultimately could be. So let me just assume that how I'm feeling right now, relative to how I could be, is like this, And so, what's the inner gesture of surrender, release, openness? It may even have a little physical, it's very subtle now. We're talking about something subtle, a physical, subtle physical letting go that goes along with a kind of a mental willingness to let go, an emotional willingness to let go, that simply looks like a kind of a release of a holding pattern. It doesn't have an outer obvious, and we may not even be really aware of what that pattern is or where it's going to lead us, but we're just sensing that gesture. And then if I make that gesture, I'll notice how in the next moment I'm going to contract again in order to get on with my life. Oh, now I'm like, all right, but now I got to do this. Now I got to judge this. Now I gotta, and everything kind of contracts again a little bit. Is there a way I can proceed moment to moment in my life that at a deep, like emotional or awareness level is a kind of an almost like now I'm holding, letting go is more like an offering. There's a way I can proceed in my life that energetically, in my awareness, and we could say in my heart energy, has the energy, the tendency of an opening and an offering. Again, it's not this obvious way we're going around offering, but it's a gesture. It's the best word I can think of for it. It's an inner gesture of letting go, availability, giving back what I moment before I was holding on to, giving back, and the fundamental, really the best way to say it is I'm giving back to life, and I'm giving back to things the freedom to be themselves because I'm not now owning them in my idea about them. I think this is really the heart of where I want to go about this. The gesture of contraction that we make is that I take my mind takes everything like I'm taking nibbles of the world. I'm going to bite this and I'm going to bite this and add it to my collection of what I know everything is. I give it a name. It has a place. I'm kind of telling everything. I look at that cup and I say, you're a cup. You know, you're a slipper. You're a chair. Right? Innocent. But what I'm doing is I'm encircling and owning the gesture of letting go or the gesture of contemplation is to come to each thing with, what are you? All right. This is not to be stupid in the everyday sense of the world. I know what it is, I can use it. But it's a beginning to open in my perception and my seeing. The basic contemplative gesture. Now I'm grabbing onto everything and telling it what it is. If I let go, I'm asking it to tell me what it is, just as an intensive, tell me who you are. I'm not going to lay that on you. Can I look at a chair? I'm perfectly capable of functioning and sitting in a chair, but there's just a relaxation where I can be a little bit more open to the unknowingness, to the mystery, to the freedom of a chair to be a chair, of a tree to be a tree, the cosmos to be the cosmos, and of course, most importantly, for other people to be who they are and to unfold themselves in our awareness rather than all the ways, we own. Let's take a moment just doing that one exercise and look at something and just feel the difference between looking at something and knowing what it is and really just enjoying the unknowing and the opportunity you're giving it, that thing, to tell you what it is. Yeah. It's not going to be verbal. It's not going to be necessarily in the form of an answer. No, I'm not a that, I'm a this. It may be the growing experience of openness itself. It may be the opportunity to experience that everything participates in the same openness. I'm not going to become less functional as a human being. In fact, I may become more so. But the foundation of my interactions is this participation in a mutual shared openness in which everything is speaking its nature to me. If we do that for a while, we may notice there's something is releasing inside because that gesture is so connected to what we hold. I can even apply that to my own body now as I sit here and I feel all the little signals coming from my body. The fact of having legs, the fact of my legs sitting on the floor, the fact of a knee either aching or not aching, all the different ways I feel in my body that I may name. Well, this is giving me a problem, this isn't, all that. Instead, relax and just feel the overall sensation of our own bodiness and invite it to speak to us, to share the openness of what it is. And how would that relax and change my relationship and the energy of my body? Okay. Or if I'm looking out at the world and I'm defining the world until, well, there's a lamp, and there's the wall the lamp is on, and there's the chest alongside the lamp, and I'm defining everything in its relationship to each other. And if I just relax that, I'm relaxing the way my awareness in my mind naturally creates solidity and projection out of an open field of energy. Right? Everything's coming in as energy, light, sound, color. These are all light is all it's all energy, all fields of energy. But I shrink it down to the thing that it's looking like, you see. And so I'm working in a world where I'm working at a very narrow spectrum of experience, this thing level, and where I have limited freedom because I'm now chained to the names and projections and ideas and judgments, you see. I relax that, coming back into more freedom for everything simply to be what it is, which is not anything, because I'm no longer naming it as anything. You see, that is the nature of the emptiness. It's empty of my projections. And yet everything is still everything. But it's not anything according to, it's just everything. Form is empty. Yet that emptiness is this beauty of form. You see, these are not philosophical principles, they're intimate indications for how to open to what this is, how to be in freedom. I begin to soften the delineations, that part of my mind. I begin to naturally experience this interbeing, this shared interbeing of everything. And that is the way, the Tao. The way is utter openness. The Tao, which is the way, is not just the way of, well, how do I practice, but it's the way things are. The way things, you can say, the mind will say, what do you mean it's the way things are? It's the way what is? What is it? Don't just tell me about openness. What is this? What is the cosmos? What? No, 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 no. And I went right back into that mind. I see. The mind that relaxes that, that releases that, that continues to open to what this is, surrenders to that, surrenders the the all the lines, all the boundaries that we've drawn and the contractions, we'll have an increasingly profound experience of the true nature of what all of this is, and we'll live in increasing harmony with it, not by nailing it down and saying what it is, you see, but understanding that principle of openness, which is no different than the openness of awareness. Openness is open awareness. Openness is open energy, etc. Uh, even the openness of our vitality. It's all part of the same principle. The Tao, that what's very unique about the Tao is how they've integrated all those different levels in their teaching, but all as an expression of some fundamental open principle, which they call the Tao. And we'll be looking later on about the next step. Well, how does that Tao, how does that open principle of unnameable openness, how does it actually manifest as all of this that seems to be other than openness, right? That's the old question. But this is going to be in a very new, immediate way of talking about that. What is this? What is this creation? What is this manifestation that seems to be so many different things and that we get stuck on, and yet it's fundamental openness. And this beautiful section of this book really kind of all the things that we need to understand about that in a very holistic kind of way. Um, the Tao is basically utterly open. Utter openness has no substance. It's no thing. Right? It ends in endlessness, meaning drop that. It begins in beginninglessness. It's just open. What we'll look at next week, the next sentence is When openness culminates, it transforms into spirit. Spirit changes to produce energy. Energy masses into form, and the one divides into two. Okay. Again, we can take that as another whole philosophical or metaphysical teaching. Oh, something's going to turn into two. No, no. But let's see how that unfolds. Um, yeah, within the idea of openness. Okay. But I just say that when openness culminates, I love this word, culminates. In other words, when openness is fully manifesting in all the dimensions of what openness is, it also includes uh, manifestation. Why should it exclude that? It's open to everything. Why shouldn't it be if it's open? And if it's open and it's a creative nature, it's always manifesting the fullness of itself. It's always culminating the full potential of what it is. But it's never bound or restricted anywhere or defined. It's the Tao. It's this creative principle. Okay. So we'll look at what that may mean. And we'll also, of course, we'll take lots of time for different times for your reflections or questions or how you're hearing all of this, uh, or where you need me to shut up or slow down, all of that. Okay. So I invite you to explore, experiment in the week ahead, a couple of different levels to even start with when you take that, when you sit meditation a little bit, when you take that next breath, just don't take that next breath, but you might say open to that next breath. As I've sometimes also said, when we're breathing, we sometimes get caught up with and self-conscious about trying to breathe better or whatever. And the best way is just to invite the breath. How would you like to breathe? So let's like be open to what's the breath want to do, and then just watch it. The breath knows what it wants to do. Mm. So we're giving everything a chance to be itself, including our own bodies, including our emotions, including our awareness. It's nice to start with the breath because that may just slow us down enough to be able to practice at the next level, just to look out, to find that place to just relax and open to the world, whether it's just for a few moments in meditation or whether you can carry that into Walmart's. What is this? What is this field of energy manifesting as light, as sound, as the next breath, as emotion? We'll be talking a lot about emotion and how, well, I won't go into it now, but how we begin to find freedom in the midst of the way emotions usually kind of restrict us, not because of the emotion themselves, but because of how we name and create stories and become compelled to act or be or avoid or feel a certain way, rather than just opening to the fundamental energy of the continual shift of emotional responsiveness in life. So obviously, there'll be a lot to explore and experiment with in the weeks ahead. Those of you who would like to stay with this a while, and I invite you to experiment and explore your own thoughts about these things, your own experience, and come back and share and ask questions. And we'll continue to open this up as we look at each statement obviously very slowly, carefully. Okay. Anything that really wants to be said before we end this evening? Otherwise, we can open it up tomorrow, to next week. Okay. So as we explore, unfold, open, understand, don't understand, we ask that all of our intentions, all of our efforts, all of our openness may contribute to the fundamental source and capacity of openness in the universe, that all beings may find freedom and ease of body and mind, that all beings may be relieved of suffering and the causes of suffering, that all beings may have happiness and the causes of happiness, that we may persist in our path with great love, despite whatever seeming obstacles and evidence arises to the contrary. Say, can we meet them with the next moment and gesture of openness and mutual blessing? Okay. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming. Great to see you.